Adrian, I just found out today in my random fact reading that I like to do. That sounds forced. Did you did you know that more human twins are being born now than ever before?
That is very interesting. I didn't. My immediate thought is that that's exponential because twins typically have a higher chance to give birth to twins. But the more twins there are, the more that happen.
And I thought it was a fitting fact to come up today because usually twins have a lot in common. Physically, whatever. Our movies have nothing in common today. So
Okay.
I thought that was just kind of fitting. Welcome back to the Drive Back Podcast. My name is Garrett.
And I'm Adrian.
And today we have a show and tell, one of our favorite episodes to do. What is show and tell, Adrian?
Show and tell is where Garrett and I have both seen one of the films here today, and the other person has not. So we basically bring it to the other person, have them watch it, and talk about what they thought.
That is absolutely correct. And today we have two, as I said, very different movies that we get to talk about. Breaking with tradition. Well, let's go ahead and jump right in. But we're going to break with tradition, and we're going to do my movie first because I feel like we always do your things first.
It just took 150 and almost 150 episodes.
We also, I guess you gotta start alternating it, the first film for today is Hail Caesar. Released in 2016, it was directed by Ethan and Joel Coen and stars Josh Brolin, George Clooney, and Alden Ehrenreich. A Hollywood fixer in the 1950s works to keep the studio stars in line. It was nominated for one Oscar for Best Production Design.
I am dying to know what you thought of this movie.
Well, it's your time. It's your first time watching it, so we'll get your spoiler-free opinions first. But if you do want to watch the movie before we jump in, it is available on Netflix. Which it's been on there for quite a while. I think it's like a Netflix kind of mainstay. So, let's go ahead. Adrian, what's your spoiler-free thoughts about Hail Caesar before we jump into some details?
Oh, I thought, do you want to say like why you picked this movie, or?
That's a good point, yeah. Because it's a very easy and simple
You've
reason.
never gone first, huh? So it's a little weird.
Podcast is falling apart. No, I honestly, I just saw it while I was browsing on Netflix, and I've seen it before, and wanted to watch it again, and might as well bring it to the attention of the podcast. That's really about it. I remembered enjoying it quite a bit when I first saw it, and just wanted to see if that momentum kept up. So
Awesome.
What did you think? Spoiler-free thoughts.
Yeah, my initial thoughts, if you've listened to any of these episodes, is I'm dying to know what Garrett's opinion of this movie is, because I think it falls into a very specific category of movie that Garrett has spoken about before. So that is my initial thought. Like, watching it, I was like, I got to know where he falls with this. And I think I might know, but I think you might surprise me too. But yeah, I think this movie is well casted and like almost overly star-studded. I think Josh Brolin does a really, really good job. I think the acting's really good. I think the movie's a little crazy just overall, but I think the Coen brothers managed to kind of tie it and rein it in just enough to make it potentially worth a watch if it's something that you're into.
Sure thing. So this being the movie that I had seen before, I had really enjoyed it when I first watched it, and upon this rewatch, I think it's fine. I definitely have some issues with it that we'll talk about when we get into the spoiler area. But I do think it is a lot of fun. I can see, I know what you're getting at, that this is the kind of movie that's made to win awards, I think is what you're going
100%,
for.
yeah.
It doesn't quite fall into that category for me, just because I do make the distinction, and maybe this is just wrong of me to do this, and maybe it's because I am a self-proclaimed critic, but I love letters to Hollywood. I always have, and movies about Hollywood that take place in Hollywood, Singing in the Rain, The Artist. I love films like that. So it does distinguish a little bit from me, or for me. Also, the performances, but that's a key part of those made for Oscar films. But this one, I think, also tries to distinguish itself in that it feels a little bit more Tarantino-y in terms of like its vignettes, and there's all these stories going on at the same time that do have a kind of loose thread holding them together.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely correct. I mean, I think, and it's also okay that this movie just elevates itself out of that category for you. Like, that can happen too. Is like, this movie definitely, was designed for this. but I definitely think that it does elevate itself a bit above that common feeling. It does have a little something extra for it that the Coen brothers brought, which is cool.
Yeah, and this is our first Coen Brothers movie on the show.
Correct.
So there's a lot of their films are. I would say this is probably one of their least well-known ones, and it makes sense, honestly, after the fact.
I kind of feel this is a weird thing because I feel like it is well known. Like I knew about this movie, I just never saw it. So I think it's just the least seen Coen Brothers. Like I think people know. Like I feel like I could go ask someone if they knew about this movie, and they'd probably remember. Like, oh, I remember the trailer for that in the theaters, kind of thing.
Yeah.
I just don't think people saw it. Like I don't think it was captivating enough in the trailer for people to really go out and flock to the theaters.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that when you ask someone like what do you know about the Coen brothers? I think everyone's going to say No Country for Old Men. They're going to say Fargo, and they're also going to say what was one of their newer ones? Like The Ballad of Buster Scruggs was a newer one on Netflix as well. Also True Grit.
Yeah.
True Grit with
True
Jeff
Grit
Bridges.
was, yeah, that's right. That's cool, yeah.
But let's go ahead. We'll drop a spoiler warning. We are going to spoil this movie. There is, I would say, there's a big part of it to spoil. There's a part of the mystery.
It's like there's like one major chunk.
Exactly. That's completely thrown out the window at the last part of it. But spoiler warning for Hail Caesar. If you do want to watch it, it is on Netflix. So that's out of the way. Yeah, my biggest complaint about this movie, now that we can talk spoilers, is that it does meander. It does feel...
It's a bit long.
Which is funny, because it's shorter than our second movie. And
it does not feel that way at all.
Exactly. And I think that's due to the fact they could have maybe cut some of the story. I think, like, Scarlett Johansson's character is great, but we didn't need
Irrelevant. At all. Again, star-studded. Like, they just had castings for castings. Channing Tatum.
I mean, he had a little bit to do with the whole communist plot.
Yeah, but like literally at the end, they're like, "Oh, and here it is."
To be fair, though, his song and dance number is
impressive.
It's really funny,
and it's super impressive. I'm really excited for when we review Magic Mike because it's exactly the same kind of dancing. I think you're really gonna like it.
I'm so getting like all these weird cameos that Channing Tatum has like been showing up in, or like small roles. I don't know if you've seen Bullet Train yet.
No, I have not. Okay,
well then I won't say anything. But he's in
I'm guessing he's in it.
Yeah. that doesn't spoil anything. I won't say anything about the character. But yeah, I mean, like it when it comes to love letters to Hollywood, this one kind of falls a little bit short because it does meander. But god damn, is Josh Brolin good in this movie?
Yeah, Josh Brolin, absolutely main character out of an insanely star-studded cast, holds his own perfectly well. I think where this movie gets a little awry is that it really, I think, is too on the money of the message it's trying to send. I mean, there's literally like a hostage situation where they sit down and hash out the message they're trying to send about writers in Hollywood.
The finer points of communism, yeah.
But it's like, it's so overt and so in your face that I think it actually takes away from the movie. I think they're trying to have this like comedy to it, like, we're going to tell you exactly what we're trying to do. But I think it actually doesn't work in this movie's favor for some reason, and I think just because it's too there. It's just right in front of you the whole time.
Yeah, and I think it's also the kind of humor that's really subtle, right? Like the when Josh Brolin is talking to one of the reporters, both of them are played by Tilda Swinton, which is very funny. But like when she yells after him, she's like, our readers want the truth, and he's like, yes, truth. And then just keeps running, like doesn't even acknowledge it. Or like when Alden Ehrenreich's character, I think it's I forget the name, Buddy or something like that. When he gets out of the car, is it Hubby or is it Hubie? Whatever.
Hubie, yeah.
When he gets out of the car and just starts playing with the lasso in the street because she's taking too long, like little things like that.
The one that I found really fun was and I actually found it really funny when he starts using his spaghetti noodle as a lasso. Literally a spaghetti western. Like, I thought that was really funny, and I love like that he's actually able to grab with it and stuff. Like the movie, I think it also falls short in itself being the most unseen Coen Brother movie in my account, is because I think it's too on the nose of like that Hollywood highbrow, like, ooh, this is the like elevated level of humor. Mm-hmm. Like, I think it shot for the moon with one specific thing, and it just didn't land.
It didn't even land among the stars. Yeah, I think
Yeah, it kind of just flew beyond, and
it definitely
I don't
tried.
know.
It bit off too much to chew, and a lot of it does feel unnecessary because a lot of it doesn't have anything to do with the main plot of
The kidnapping.
Baird getting kidnapped. Which, to be fair, Baird takes that entire kidnapping very well. Like, he's
Well,
just
he gets
sitting there.
fed well. He gets. I love when they're saying like Hollywood's treated us poorly. He goes, "Well, they've been pretty nice to me." Like, I don't think it's that bad.
Also,
But
underrated moment
go ahead.
too is when they're having all the sandwiches coming out, and he takes one and he's just playing with it in his hands. It hasn't even eaten, and someone's like, "Would you like another finger sandwich?" And he takes it. He has two, like one in each hand. It's just, it's
But
hilarious.
I think yeah. I mean, there's something really strange that happened with this movie about halfway through. I felt like the Coen brothers were trying to do a Wes Anderson film for some reason. Like, just the vibe, not the shot composition, not the cinematography, but just like the overall vibe. Like when they show up to save Bard or Baird in the room, and it's just that kind of like awkward interaction of like, "Hello, I'm here to save you." Right, well, let's go then. And just like that kind of speaking felt so Wes Anderson to me
Yeah.
at certain times, that it just kind of felt like a weird Coen Brothers move. It felt just like a little replicative or replicant-ish.
I would be very interested to see what both of us think, because I haven't seen it, but what both of us would think of Burn After Reading, which is also the
Have
Coen
not.
brothers, which is also a comedy. So I think that would be an interesting one to kind of
That's
watch
with
after
Brad
this.
Pitt, right?
Yeah.
I think I saw it
George
a long
Clooney,
time
too.
ago, but I could not tell you the plot at all.
I think it's the gym workers and there's someone from the
Yeah.
CIA leaves some documents behind and they see it and that's what the
Yeah.
whole plot is. But yeah, I mean, there's really not much else to talk about with this movie because again, it's kind of hard because it does delve into the realm of comedy, and comedy is very subjective, and we can just talk about moments all day long and performances. I do think the production design Oscar is very warranted. The specifically like the Roman sets look very good when they're filming the Caesar movie.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, come on, Mr. Krabs as George Clooney's second in command is
Yeah.
pretty great.
I also thought it was pretty neat that this movie did a pretty good job of kind of peeling back the curtain on, especially at the end-ish, kind of like third act, beginning or whatever, but when Baird is back and he's giving the final speech about Jesus, and it's like building this up and everyone's kind of like intrigued and everything, and then he messes up the line, and it kind of just made me think about like, wow, every scene that I've seen in Hollywood is not the first take. Like, it's probably like the 100th.
I mean, there may be there are a lot of first take wonders out there.
Well, I know
but-
Clint Eastwood is really big on first takes. You like, what do I pay you for if you can't do it on the first try? Like, why are you an actor?
Mhm.
But it was just super interesting because I feel like that does happen a lot, and you don't really realize, like, we as the audience feel the same way that audience did, empowered by the speech, drawn in, pulled into the screen, and then to just know that that's just manufactured was a cool peel of the curtain for me. I thought that was pretty fun.
Yeah, also like just the management of everything.
Yeah,
Like,
how
you know,
everything works. Yeah.
and how quick the life. I don't know how accurate it is to how production heads were back in that
Also,
time, but
Not a love letter to Hollywood, but a roast letter to extras. The entire, just absolutely running extras through the mud.
it's actually pretty true.
Like, there's literally a scene where they're like, everyone else on set, love them. Gotta keep an eye on those extras, though. Okay.
It's a great part. Also, I got to point out when Baird finally comes back and he's talking with Josh Brolin, and Josh Brolin's just sitting there, like listening to him just drone on. We've all done it to our friends, when they're talking about something that you just do not care or agree with or whatever, and
Or
you're
they're just
sitting there.
wrong, like 100%,
Yeah.
and you're like, I'm about to tell you that you're incorrect.
And then literally just goes up and slaps the shit out of him, and he's like,
And he-
"Go do this movie," and he's like, "Okay," and gives up on
Yeah.
everything. Which
His
is
entire
fantastic.
like newfound like, we gotta do better by Hollywood, like we can be bigger and better and bolder than we are, and he's like, I'll just go act now, thank you.
It's fantastic. I love that sequence. But yeah, I mean, other than that, there's a lot of unnecessariness.
Super niche, super
Yeah.
super niche.
it feels like a movie that's made for people like me, again, who like the love letters to Hollywood and Hollywood history, but it's not about a real event. It's kind of just like a fake event that takes place in a fake Hollywood. So it's a little hard to kind of connect with what's going on.
Sure.
It's not even like based on like a real. I mean, besides the obviously the underground communist kind of things going on in Hollywood at the time, like the blacklisting and all that. Like it's not like it's not like The Artist, which is based off of artists going from silent to talkies. It's just a little bit different, but yeah, I mean, I got really nothing else to say about this movie. Do you have anything else you want to add before we jump into some final thoughts?
No, I mean, it was my first time watching it, so my final thoughts are kind of that. I think this movie has a lot going for it, but it just ends up falling into too niche of a market for me to really kind of enjoy. I think it tries a little too much to push itself on me, and it wants me to like it. And I just kind of, I guess maybe it just shoves me the wrong way a little bit. It's got a lot of great moments, but ultimately falls short, so I give this movie a 60.
60, okay. Yeah, so I said, while it does meander, this love letter to Hollywood is still a fun and funny time with a great cast, even if some of it doesn't necessarily need to be there, and it never really justifies its existence to me, like it never really needed to be made. But still glad that I gave it another watch. So that being said, I did give the movie a 73. So just went ahead and threw that out there. Let's go ahead and jump right into the second movie today, which is Adrian's pick. That is The Exorcism of Emily Rose. Released in 2005, it was directed by Scott Derrickson and stars Laura Linney, Tom Wilkinson, and Shore Agdashlu. I hope I'm saying that correctly. A lawyer takes on a negligent homicide case involving a priest who performed an exorcism on a young girl. Which, to be fair, had no idea this was a courtroom movie. So that was a stunning revelation.
Well, that would have ruined the surprise.
I know. But why did you pick Exorcism of Emily Rose?
Yeah, this movie's definitely a guilty pleasure for me. I talk about this movie monthly at minimum. I always find a way. This movie I just think is really neat. I think the courtroom part of it really brings a lot to the table for this movie. I think it would be completely short if not, but I think the questions that it asks are very interesting, and I also think it's one of the scarier possessions that I've seen take place in all of these the exorcism of movies, aside from the movie that it will always live in the shadow, which is The Exorcist. But yeah, I just think it's pretty good.
Sure. I mean, going into this, it was really funny. I was expecting just run-of-the-mill, by-the-numbers horror movie, and then saw that it was directed by Scott Derrickson, and my hopes went up, because he did Doctor Strange, did Sinister, and The Black Phone, which is one of my favorite movies this year. So my hopes went up, and then realized it was that sounds bad. Realized it was more of a courtroom drama than it was a horror movie, and I thought that was really interesting. And I think that's the biggest thing about me for this movie. I think it's a really interesting take on a genre that is, I would say, tired.
And oversaturated with the same gimmick over and over again.
That's exactly right. I mean, the only movie I think kind of comes close in terms of being kind of fresh in the exorcism genre would be The Last Exorcism, which is that found footage one.
Yeah.
Not a good movie, but it still kind of felt somewhat fresh.
Tried something new for sure, yeah.
It tried for sure, and but this movie, I think I did end up liking it a little bit more than I thought I was going to. But I think the things that disappointed me with this movie are different than any other horror movie, so that's going to be really interesting.
That's fun, though, right?
Into.
That's fun.
This is honestly. This is going to hold a special place because this is a horror movie that I can recommend to people who don't like horror movies.
Exactly.
So,
I think it's,
definitely
absolutely.
One up there.
There's very little jump scares. I mean, there are horrific parts of the movie, not too much gore or anything like that, but it's telling such an interesting take on a story and a concept that I think you almost find yourself you're scared in a different way. It's not gonna jump out in your face and show you a scary face or something like that.
Yeah.
It's just very it's very interesting.
Exactly. So Let's go ahead and jump into some spoilers. If you want to watch The Last Exorcism of Emily Rose, all the apps say that it's on Paramount Plus, and it's not. You do have to rent the movie, but it was free to rent on Amazon for me. I don't know.
Yeah, same.
Oh, okay. Maybe it was just on sale or something.
Yeah.
But that is where you can watch it if you want to rent it or buy it or do whatever it is you want to do. So let's go ahead and jump into spoilers for Exorcism of Emily Rose. And one of the big things I want to talk about off the bat is this movie says it is based on a true story. I hate these lies.
Did you look it up?
I mean, obviously the court case was a real thing, yes, but ghosts and demons don't exist. Stop, saying that this is actual true events. It's not.
Well, it's actually the whole point of the movie.
Well, I mean, I'm getting at the superstitious nonsense that's disproven by science very easily, and not the actual courtroom thing did happen. This was a real case that went into real court. Absolutely, I accept.
So
that.
Based on a true story.
I'm talking about the superstitious stuff, the pseudoscience.
It's half.
It's half
It's a quarter
for me.
not true.
Yeah, it's not like the. Well, I mean, it's not like the Conjuring movies, which are like these are based on real. No, they're not. No one's.
Well, but technically, all of the paranormal stuff that happens in the movie is one perspective, so they do counter all of the paranormal sides of it with actual reasoning.
Yes, in which I do need to point out one of the things that's great about this movie. The jury takes that. Yeah. And they're like, yeah, no, he's guilty. Which is great. Although they do the whole, movie thing. I don't know if it actually happened in real life. I'd have to look it up. But, they're like, oh, it's time served. And it's like, really? No, the guy's responsible for someone's death. Whatever. But, that being aside, one of my other big criticisms about this movie is that the performances are a little wooden.
Some of them. Some are very good, I think, and some are wooden.
I'm interested to see if ours line up. I think Tom Wilkinson as the priest is good.
Yes.
And he does display a level of kind of emotion. And Tom Wilkinson is usually the best part in a lot of the movies he's in that aren't that good. So I can give him that compliment.
I think he's the highest apple in a lower basket of actors. So a lot of lower budget movies can get him. But he is very good. Yeah,
like the highest tier C-list actor or something like that.
Exactly.
But Laura Linney, very wooden.
If you don't know who that is real quick, the priest, he's definitely a guy, if you watch him, you're going to go, I've seen that guy. He's in enough stuff that you're going to be like, oh, yeah. But you might not know.
He was the British guy with the Chinese name in Rush Hour. That was exactly who he is. But yeah, Laura Linney, very wooden in this movie.
Yeah, I would agree. I don't think she brought it enough. I mean, I think that might have been the script, though. I'm not too sure, but I would agree.
And then the prosecution lawyer is kind of mixed for me. Toward the beginning, he's pretty wooden, but as he gets kind of more and more fed up with the bullshit, like I would, I'm like, okay, I can identify with this character a little bit more.
Which I think again might have been in the script of start out as a generic person, but as it gets more involved, kind of open up and elaborate on your character. So maybe that was all part of it.
Exactly, yeah. And then Jennifer Carpenter, hit and miss. I think she's very good when she's actually in the possessed state. I would say she's kind of boring when she's not. But maybe that's just, that's the character.
Yeah, I think she's pretty good throughout it, though, but I do think she was born to play a possessed person.
When the makeup's on and all that. Yeah. I mean, she's very pretty otherwise, but they throw all the makeup on and
demons.
Have her. I mean, hey, I've seen enough anime. Demons are hot. But that's a weird
we're gonna leave that one.
Yeah, that's staying.
That's staying in the podcast.
That's staying in. One of Garrett's things is going in there. But I mean, other than that, I think it's very interesting to see it as a courtroom drama. And I do think that it does spend a little too much time in the court on things that aren't as interesting. I mean, it's really cool that they give us a lot of the scientific perspective in telling her what's actually wrong with her.
Yeah.
But it does go on a little too long, I would say. This movie is overlong.
I would say it's a little long, but I think the third act certainly feels like a good payoff to me. I think it really pays off.
And it is a slow build-up. I would say the beginning is pretty slow. The middle has a couple things that happen, and you're like, oh, okay, well, let's see what goes. And then the ending really takes off.
But when you find out she's Legion, Beelzebub, all the demons all at once.
There's no reason that all these lords of the underworld would take over this nobody in the middle of some podunk town. Like, it's the stupidest thing.
I think. Oh, yeah, it might be dumb, but I really like it because I think it's the only. I think it's so cool. The scene where she's like bent backwards and starts listing off all the names until finally, like, I am the one. Like, you are face to face.
Which again makes no sense, and it just lends more into the fact that, like, people who are possessed they're not actually. It's a mental health condition, and they just read up on something. Like, they established she went to school, she knew all these sorts of things, she had learned the languages at some point, she'd been exposed to them, and she may have heard Beelzebub and these other names that are very commonplace to hear when you're in religious school. It's not hard to list them off. If she had, thrown out, like, Hecate or something like that, I would have been like, okay, dang, they're going with something completely different. But no, I am the one. It's the stupidest thing.
I really like it. I think it's awesome. And I love that she just, like, bends backwards. I think it's such a cool shot.
Which it's like, and I think one of the juxtapositions I want to make is that the one thing that I do like when it's done like that was in the movie The Fourth Kind, and I just thought about this. It's at the very end when the alien has taken over our main girl, and the alien through her voice says, "I am God," which is a great moment because it's like you're using that to mock something, which is much more interesting than just saying, "I am the big thing," which that big thing would have no interest in. They'd have no interest in doing that.
But, well, I think the whole idea was that, like, there was a whole, like, it wasn't just demons in her. There were also, like, archangels. And there was basically, like, a war between heaven and hell was being fought inside of her.
Yeah.
Because it was like she was the conduit to everything. And, like, she was the one that was supposed to make people believe and all this stuff.
Yeah. But again, just like maybe I hate to do this because obviously there is a real person that this is based off of, and I don't want to make fun of anyone like that. But why her? Like, why this boring ass white girl from the middle of the Midwest, and not, like, it doesn't make sense. If you want to make your presence,
why anybody else? I mean,
like, that's the whole point. It doesn't make sense to me. It just happens to like these like random people in the middle of somewhere. Like, it doesn't, like, if I was a powerful demon, which I aspire to be. If I was a powerful demon, I would go after, I don't know, like a movie star or something like that who has a public presence to give it all away. Like,
who's to say that they don't, though?
I mean, that's the whole point. Like, it doesn't... You see these things in people who are ultra religious. It never happens to people that aren't religious, by the way. That's another big thing to point. This is turning into a debate podcast.
I'm not debating.
I'm just saying it never happens to people who aren't religious. It's always people who are religious, and that they get possessed. And when you see people who are not, who are more popular with more eyes on them, you have more people saying that there is a mental health condition going on, and they get treatment that they need. Does it always work? Maybe not. It depends on the person. But when you have someone in this environment who's raised around this cultivating idea of being in this religion, they're going to foster the idea of something else happening.
Yes, but I mean, I think the reason that always happens to people that are more religious, if we were to take this at face value, that all of it is real, that they're already more susceptible to believing in something like that and buying into something like this happening, whereas somebody that isn't religious probably is a little bit harder to convince that you are a demon possessing them. Like, they'd not believe that initially, whereas, like, a religious person, the first inclination is to believe that it is a demon or it is some being from hell. So I still think it makes sense, like, story-wise. I think that's why it's a tried and true horror story. Like, It's the tale as old as time of the fall of a religious person that's super dedicated. Also, how beaten down she was at home. Like, a lot of movies play in on that, like, mentally beaten and worn people are more susceptible to demons entering because they're weak of mind and soul.
Yeah. Which is funny because they're the one, the people who are religious think they're the stronger ones of body and mind and soul. But just an interesting hypocritical thing. I won't go too deep into that. But I mean, other than that, I think the movie is fine. I'm glad that I watched it. I don't think it's one of those movies I'm glad that I've seen, but I don't think I would watch it again.
I think you'd be shocked. I'd be interested. Obviously, like we talk all the time, but I'm interested to see how often you think about this movie when people talk about horror movies and like possession movies, because it's like one of the first ones that comes to my mind when people talk about demon possession and stuff like that.
I'd be interested. I mean, I don't have a lot of those conversations because they just don't naturally come up about possession in horror movies. I feel like when we talk about horror movies with anyone, you kind of like my thoughts always go to the movies that I find either scary or just like scarily beautiful. So like The Witch, Midsommar, Hereditary, things like that. And I kind of push aside the more mainstream Hollywood ones just because. I mean, this one does this. This one is not made to earn a buck. This one is like they're trying to actually tell a story, which I very highly.
It feels genuine.
Yeah. I think.
Like, I mean, the storytelling, like the purpose of the movie feels genuine when watching. It doesn't feel like there's like, they're not trying to take the Exorcist, like the Exorcist light. They're not trying to take away from that. They're just like making their own thing. They're not trying to do a cash grab on the genre. It just feels unique.
Yeah, you can tell that Scott Derrickson has maybe a love for this story or has an interest in it, and maybe that's why he took it up.
Sure.
But I mean, other than that, I think it's fine. It's got a couple of good scares in it. They're not really jump scares, but they're tense scenes. Particularly her night alone in the dorm room is kind of when it all starts is kind of nice. Which they never like. If I watched this whole thing, never fast forward it, but I still never picked up on. Do they never explained like how it came to be with her?
How what came to be with her?
The demon or whatever it is.
Well, just that she was beaten. She was available as a husk, basically, because she was so worn down mentally from her abuse at home.
Okay. Again, that doesn't distinguish to me that that's enough to be like, oh, I want that person. I mean, but hey.
But you don't. I mean, well, how do you know? What?
Hey, I'm available. I'm right here, and I'm on camera. I'll document the whole thing. Watch, it won't happen.
Because again, in line with that, though, like you are not the person that you would not believe that. So why would they pick you?
Because I would expose it. Well, like that, you want a voice. It's right here. Don't have a big audience, but hey, we'll get you going. If this podcast suddenly takes off and I get a lot more charismatic, then you know some deal would have been struck.
if this episode gets like 1 million views, you know that something happened.
Or get all your friends, make sure this video has exactly 666 views and stays there.
Yeah, there you go.
Just saying, we'll private the video after it hits that. But I got nothing else to say about this movie.
Yeah. What are your final thoughts?
So final thoughts. I said, while it's an interesting idea to have a courtroom drama around an exorcism, the wooden performances and overlong runtime of the film do drag it down a little bit for me, as well as masquerading the superstitious parts as true when they should have just gone full on courtroom drama. Because of that, I give it a 62. I think it's better than a lot of the Hollywood horror movies that come out because it actually adheres to something that is more, I would say, widely viewable.
Sure. Yeah, that seems fair. I think this movie is really interesting. I really enjoy the possession parts of it, and I also really enjoy the science part of it. I just think it's all around really interesting. It does something that the genre doesn't always strive for, which is uniqueness. And because of that, I give this movie an 82.
Wow, all right. A 20-point difference. That is not too bad. Well, that is going to bring us to our new favorite segment of any show, and that is going to be to guess the critic scores and guess the audience scores on Rotten Tomatoes. And for bonus points, we'll go for the Metacritic as well. Okay. So, Mr. Adrian, can you tell me what the critic rating is for Hail Caesar?
I'm just going to shoot for it. I think it's going to be like, I'm going to say 90.
A 90.
Flat 90.
That is an interesting... You are pretty close. It is an 86 for the Metacritic, or for the Rotten Tomatoes rating.
Okay, I thought... Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. 86.
I misspoke. And for... This is one of those interesting ones. What do you think the audience score for Hail Caesar is?
I think I gotta go with, like, you're usually a lot more in favor or, like, in line with the critics, and I'm usually more in line with the audiences. But I feel like both of us were like, So I'm thinking that the audience score would be like 50-50, kind of like we are. So I will go, but I want to go lower because I feel like it's not. I'm really thinking. I'm just gonna go do some quick math. Carry the 3. I'm gonna go 46.
God damn, you were close. It's a 44. You were
Wow,
really
my
close.
quick back of the napkin math was really good somehow.
You should have carried the 2, not the 3.
Oh yeah, it's always the logarithmic scale is always off.
Which is so crazy, because I feel like this is one of those times where I don't necessarily feel like either is right. I think it's a little bit more in the middle. Usually, the audiences are wrong a lot of the time. Again, one of my favorite things was walking out of, I think it was Lamb last year. Or no, it wasn't Lamb. It was some other movie. Oh, Green Knight, my best picture. And walked out, and 2 of the audience members that were sitting behind me, I heard them walking out, and they were like, "Oh, we should have seen Snake Eyes instead." And I was like, "That's how you know it's a good movie." But so that's gonna be Hail Caesar. For bonus points, what is the Metacritic score?
I'm gonna feel like Metacritic is typically more in line, just in general. So I will say 65.
You're decently close. It was actually very close to me. It was a 72.
Oh, a little bit higher. Okay.
So the Metacritic score is actually about right for what I would say, and the user score is a 6. So that's kind of I would say it's more in line with us, which is really interesting. Now let's go ahead and get into the Exorcism of Emily Rose. What do you think is the critics' tomato meter?
I think this is the opposite situation. I think critics did not like this movie, and I think it had not like a cult following, but I think it definitely has its genre watchers. So for critic, I will go. I'm gonna say 41.
So close again. It's 44 again.
Oh wow, that's interesting. So audience likes Hail Caesar as much as critics like The Exorcism of Emily Rose.
Yeah, which is a really weird parallel.
Okay.
But what do you think the audience score is?
I'm just going out with it. I'm going to go 69.
Nice. No, it is a 60. So you are close yet again.
Okay, flat 60. I went a little high. Okay.
Which I think is, I think the audience score, for once, I think the audience is a little bit more on track there. Which that doesn't happen very often. But what do you think the Metacritic score is for Exorcism of Emily Rose?
I'm going to say 52.
You were a little high. It's 46, so it's actually higher than Rotten Tomatoes.
Wow. You don't see that very often.
And it is a 6.6 for the user score. So that is
You heard it here first. Exorcism of Emily Rose is a better movie than Hail Caesar.
To the audience, which we know is most of the time wrong. But that's going to be the end of this episode. That one's out of the bag. Next week, I'll go over that in a minute. Adrian, if people want to follow us online, see what we're doing, see where we're going, and maybe spy on us, I don't know, where can they do that?
The Drive Back Podcast on all platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Overcast, wherever you want to listen audibly. We're over there. Make sure to follow. We post every Monday. And then if you want to get that extra content as well as watch our actual faces through this podcast, you can find us on YouTube at the Drive Back Podcast. Make sure to subscribe, like, hit the bell. We post every Monday as well as additional content here and there. I know, Garrett, you've got something in the works, a big movie for everybody.
What?
Your movie collection?
That already happened, bud. It's up.
You posted it.
Yeah, I thought
you didn't tell me you posted it.
I thought I told you. That's been up for like a week now.
That's how much I check our own channel. No, I thought you were still editing. But that's out, so there's some extra content there for you. I'll definitely go give it a watch. I had no idea. But yeah, so just make sure to follow everywhere. Again, every Monday we'll see you.
That is absolutely correct. Next week we have a first timers, and I did change this on the schedule quite a while back, but we are going to be taking a look at Mirai, which is a Oscar-nominated anime film, which we'll be taking a look at next week. Very excited for that. Following that, we got we finally have another franchise fever coming up, which is kind of nice. We haven't had one of those since July, which is pretty sweet. But we're going to take a look at the Oceans movies. So that's going to be a lot of fun to do.
Including 8, I imagine.
8 and the original Ocean's 11 with Frank Sinatra, Sammy Davis Jr., and Dean Martin.
The original. Okay.
So, but that's going to bring us to an end for this episode. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. We love you so much. We'll see you next time here on The Drive Back. Thank you for listening to this episode of The Drive Back. Make sure to be on the lookout for new episodes every Monday, and make sure to follow us on social media.